if gold or silver drop in price after I order it?
Well, everything fluctuates with time, but nothing has held up longer and better than gold and silver throughout all the changes that have happened in history. Your first ounce of silver is at spot price, and you get free shipping on any order over $99 at sdbullion.com/RP.
As a responsible person with growing concerns for your privacy and personal liberty, you want to know where we're headed and what you can do about it. We ask the experts what you need to do to take prudent and responsible action to safeguard your family's wealth and well-being, and what basic first steps will help you to be aware and prepared. ReluctantPreppers.com.
Reluctant Preppers provides educational awareness and commentary only. Opinions expressed do not constitute personalized financial advice. Viewers are encouraged to do their own research and seek qualified personal financial consultation before making investment decisions. Welcome back, Reluctant Preppers. We have a very popular returning guest. David Morgan, also known as the Silver Guru, is back with us again here on Reluctant Preppers. David, thank you for joining us once again.
Oh, Dunagun, it's always fun to be with you. Thank you.
Near the end of this interview, I want us to touch on that we're going to both be in person at the Red Pill Expo in 2 weeks in Hartford, Connecticut. But let's circle back on that. First, I wanted you could give us an update on what you're seeing in the major markets, because after a world's worst quarter in December and the best January on record in first quarter, we're seeing a lot of choppiness and volatility in the stock markets and some strange action going on in the bond market over the last quarter as well. Could you tell us what you're seeing and what the people whom you network with and the research that you're doing is indicating to you about that?
Sure. I mean, you said it, and, careful observation. A lot of people look but don't see, excuse the metaphor. But the idea is that when you get a down market like we saw in December, worse since the 30s, and then an up market in January, this is what I like to call an indecision pattern. I mean, think about it. If you get something really selling off really hard, then all of a sudden makes a U-turn and goes really fast the other way. This is like people can't make up their mind. It's like, I want to buy that car. No, I don't. Yes, I do. Yes, no, I don't. So that, I think, is a good analogy for what's going on. I have maintained for a long time, maybe too long, and my detractors have certainly thrown it back at me, but we are what's called a distribution pattern. So if you study the market as hard as I have, what you'll come to determine, at least I've satisfied myself and many others won't admit this, but most stocks, commodities, or whatever, but let's just talk stocks, there is an accumulation period where it goes along basically a flat line. The stock might move, as an example, from $5 to $6 for months or weeks. Then there's the markup, and that's where they get the public involved. And then the stock goes from that $6, breaks out of the channel formation and moves up to, let's call it, $20. Now, the people that owned it at $5, they can't just sell it all at $20 because there's no market for that much stock. So they have to distribute it. So what do? They feed it out. They keep putting out good news, and they feed it out into the dumb money. The smart money moves it into dumb hands, goes into pension funds, money managers, hedge funds, and most of those people are pretty sophisticated, but the general public and pension funds, really. And a lot of, what do you call them? I forget the exact title, but these defined benefit programs for large corporations like the aerospace industry or the auto industry. They basically are in there buying stocks whether they want to or not, because it's part of their mandate to invest that money for to provide a pension for their employees after they retire. So we have been in that pattern for a long time. And why would it be such a long time? And the answer is fairly obvious, because there's so doggone much money that's been made since not only since Trump took office, which took it to a new high, but since the crisis of 2008. So you just can't dump all that stock without bringing the price right back where it started. So, long-winded, I think we are going to see lower-priced stocks by the end of this year rather than higher-priced stocks. And I know I'm not alone there, but I'm kind of a lone wolf. Most of your commentators in my space, I mean, Martin Armstrong makes a great case, very smart guy. Don't always agree with him. He could be right. I could be wrong. It's possible. But I don't like the way it looks. I don't like the way it's acting. And from my experience, and I've got plenty of it, it's an indecision, and it could go either way, but it's primarily looking to me like it wants to go lower. The distribution's almost done. So that's when they mark it down. Faculty, too, is after they distribute it, what do? They go the other way. They short the market and bring it down, start pouring out bad news, start compounding it. The only caveat, I guess, is that, and I hate to sound like Mr. Conspiratorial, analyst, but the facts are what happened in December was probably made a U-turn because there's so much riding on the U.S. equity markets that the Fed probably went in and bought futures like crazy, just like they did after the 1987 crash when they mandated a working group on financial markets. It basically said, hey, boys, we're never going to let this happen again, and brought in the Securities Exchange Commission, the Council, the CFTC, and all the big boys from Wall Street and government entities at the highest levels to manipulate the market. And that's a fact. I mean, anyone that disagrees, just do a cursory research on a working group on financial markets, commonly known as the Plunge Protection Team. So we don't have any free markets, hardly at all. So I have to give that caveat. I mean, we could, fundamentally, we should be lower. I think we are going to be lower by the end of the year. I mean, I'm giving a long answer. But I have to, I must, as a thinking human, say, look, it's possible that the powers that be, the working group on financial markets, want it higher, print up even more QE, and throw it in the stock exchange, and it could take it higher. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think it's going to come down.
I should have mentioned earlier, to set a context, this is Thursday, May 23rd, 2019. So a lot of the comments we're making are within that context. What about, as Gregory Mannarino, it's interesting because some of our other favorite guests here, such as Rob Kirby, said back in the beginning of December, he said, I've never been as bearish as I am right now. And that was right before the big drop happened. And there was there were a few choppy days right before that where the stock market moved up a little bit, and people said, oh, Rob's doom and gloom, and then they went straight down for a month. So also, Gregory Mannarino has talked about how he says if you want to know what direction the stock markets are going to take in the midterm, look at the bond market first, because when you're looking for signs of a major breakdown, you're going to see it first in the bond market. So from your studies of the bond market, what is that telling us?
Well, first I'll get a little background, and most people that are listening to your show know this, but I mean the whole idea back 20, 30, 40, 50 years was that bonds were safe money, you got interest, and if you were in government bonds, it was guaranteed, nothing safer. And equities were more speculative, but usually higher returns. So you'd balance the portfolio between stocks and bonds because they had different profiles. That's no longer true. Really isn't. They basically moved together now because of the manipulation, the way interest rates are determined, rather than the free market making the interest rate determination. So I agree with Greg. Greg and I are pretty close, and so are Rob and I, actually. So yeah, it's tipped its hand. I mean, we are more or less guaranteed a recession with the slightly inverted yield curve. Could get more inverted. And the bond market, believe it or not, was probably the best place you could be for 35 or 40 years. But nothing grows to the moon. It's time to exit the bond market. I mean, the only place I would consider putting money into bonds would be corporates, not into treasuries, even though they're deemed the safest. Do you really think the United States of America has the wherewithal to pay back, there's $20 trillion that's on the book, or $22 trillion, and then if you look at Catherine Ostrom-Spitz's work with Professor Skidmore, and that's another $20 trillion or so. We're looking at $40 trillion. You really think that the taxing ability of the United States government from Washington, D.C. could tax the citizenry enough to pay that back? And the answer is absolutely not. So what that guarantees is you're either going to get paid back in dollars that are worth less and worth less and worthless at some point in time, or you're going to have to take a haircut on what the bonds are or value, or delay the return. In other words, all those treasury bills that are good for 6 months, we're delaying them until 6 years, or that type of thing. That's not going to happen. I really doubt it. What will take place is they continue to debase the currency, and they just can't guarantee what the value of that currency will be. And that's where we're going to get into a liquidity squeeze, and that's where we're going to see the run to gold. You see the stock market coming off. So my big statement, so to distill this down to 2 minutes, David, the number one thing you should take away from this, I've been saying on several interviews, is I'm pretty convinced at this point, until the stock market, the U.S. equity market, I'm going to be specific, starts down in a meaningful way, you're not going to see a big move in gold. Once you do see that, you will. It might not be one for one immediately. I'm looking for 1350, 1360 as the breakout point in gold on good volume. I don't know where the stock market will be at that time, probably lower than it is today. But there'll be momentum building. And as the stock market continues to deteriorate, people that look at their portfolios either on an institutional or a personal level will say, oh my goodness, I'm not worth as much as I once was. I've lost this much in this stock and this much in this stock, and they'll start to consider, where else can I go? In this environment, you can't go to bonds. It's not safe. It moves with the stock market primarily. You can't really go anywhere but the precious metals. You go into commodities, you can go into energy, you can go into defense stocks. I mean, I'm talking defense stocks like Lockheed Martin or some of the, the war machine will do well. So you could go there. But I think there'll be a liquidity squeeze where people want to stay liquid and they want safety. And that, for most people, means the United States dollar.
Another thing you just made me remember was they were saying that you mentioned like defense will do well even in a downturn. There's also the counties that are right around Washington, D.C., the real estate market has been always going up, even in downturns, even when the rest of the country is going down in real estate values. The federal government and their employees there just are insulated from the real world economy. It was humorous. We were visiting the Ron Paul Peace and Prosperity Institute conference a while ago, and taking a walk there. So this is in Fairfax County, Virginia, I think. And looking down, there was one of these manhole covers on the street, and it said Fairfax County, made in India. on the cast manhole cover. I thought, wow, the most prosperous county in the country, and they're outsourcing they're offshoring their manufacturing of their stuff. Along the way, you mentioned the U.S. Equity market and U.S. bond market. You were talking with me earlier before we started recording about other bond markets. What connection do you see between the size of equity markets versus bond markets worldwide?
Most people, the equity markets are huge. There's 16 equity markets worldwide that are worth more than $1 trillion at the current time. And the U.S. equity market's worth probably $30 billion round number. The bond market is normally roughly twice as big in market cap as the equity market. So huge amount of money in the bond market. I mean, there's just trillions of dollars every day that's, changing hands electronically in the bond market and the currency pits, moving between the dollar and the yen and the euro and the Aussie dollar and on it goes. So just a massive amount of money games, I'll call it. These are money games, but they yield a profit for somebody and a loss for somebody else in most cases. So it's just the way it is. But there's very little correlation between these markets today and the physical economy. And I think that's one thing that people are waking up to. Another thing that they're waking up to is that just because you got a high number on the Dow Jones Industrials or the S&P 500 doesn't mean you really are, that wealth effect is making you feel more prosperous. In fact, most Americans have had higher numbers at the end of the year as far as what their wages are, but lower lifestyle, because a big number doesn't necessarily mean a high lifestyle. And I think it's really sickening. The inflation is so much bigger than it's reported. I mean, the Fed's making noises like, we got to get up to 2%. And once we do, things will be wonderful. And really, it's probably around 8 or 9%. And I base that on someone that's more studied on it than myself, John Williams from shadowstats.com. John's pretty conservative in his analysis. He's a numbers guy and he doesn't BS. And that's a metric based on 1980 metrics where we really did tell the truth about the inflation. So if you feel like you're getting squeezed, and I, of course, at my age, I'm a grumpy old man these days, Dunagun, but, just the fast foods. I mean, I'm not a big fast food guy. I'm pretty, eat organic and eat healthy most of the time. But, something that used to be very, very reasonable cost is rather unreasonable now. I mean, who thinks you would pay $10 for a hamburger, for crying out loud? In some of these places you do. So I'm off on a rabbit trail. You can pull me out and ask me something.
Well, did want to pull you back and ask you about something that we've talked with you about in the past, and that's one of your environmentally friendly mining companies. If you could give us an update at one of your speculative
let me see if I can get to
plays.
My email really quick. Well, I'll just state it in general terms. It's doing well. There was we did an update for our members with the CEO, and we went through and recorded it, of course, and I guess there was a misstatement or misunderstanding on, when you're talking about the quantity going through the system. And so one of the guys wrote me, and it's a member, and said, hey, this is only going to give you an ounce of gold a month. That's not very lucrative or something along those lines. I'm kind of exaggerating. So there was, it's one of these, is it a gram or a kilogram? It's a factor of 1,000 or whatever. So we got the numbers from the company twice. We got them from two individuals, one from the IR department, and one's from one of the management. And I'll be putting that out as an update. In fact, I may do it later today. But it's doing well. It's kind of like anything. If you really worked in industry, especially on the startup type of situation I have when I worked in the aircraft industry, because I was assigned to the test fields, meaning this, we did a mock-up, and then the first unit, and then that's tested, ground tested, engine runs, all that stuff, and then you basically do the first flight and all that. So you're just right there, and nothing comes off the drawing board and is built and is exactly the way it looks on paper or on the computer or the 3D modeling and all that. So the point I'm making is that a lot of it's trial and error. So you tweak it, you run a test, you find something, you try something, and that. So we're in that phase, and what we've done is eliminated a lot of metal going through the system that doesn't need to. We call that the dry phase, which means pulling like a lot of copper out of these boards and stuff before it ever hits into the system where this reagent is used and the rest of the process proceeds. So, live and learn more. It becomes more efficient. It becomes more lucrative. It yields better, and it speeds up the process. So that's one, I won't call it a breakthrough. That's just one thing we just learned by, again, trial and error learning. Additionally, the big company, the multi-billion-dollar company that's kind of, let's say, had a heavy hand on this little company that I have as a speculation, is, I won't say backed off, but we're not as dependent on them anymore. And so we're freer to just build our own plants, which we're doing. And then, of course, there's a sister company, as you know, that's involved. It's also doing part and parcel with their own unit, especially on the dry side of the system, not on the wet side. The wet side means they're using this inert reagent that is being patented. That's really a breakthrough. I mean, to be able to replace cyanide with something that's so inert you could drink it is really a breakthrough through the whole industry. And yet there aren't many people that know about it in the mining sector. But believe me, the big companies do know about it. I can't name them because of a CA, a confidentiality agreement. But anybody that knows, like the top 5 miners in the world, 4 of them are involved in this right now, sending samples to be tested to see if this process really works or not. So pretty exciting times. I'm not running out of patience, but it's been 2 years, and the stock's moved from 25 cents to $2 down to 50 cents, and now up about 70 cents. So it's sort of like the stock market we just talked about. Big drop, big up move, but it's far from its potential. I really think this is a stock that could be worth quite a bit relative to the return. We know what the returns are. And as I said, we're still tweaking the system, so that could be even better. But I think we're pretty close to optimizing the system right now. And the returns on these, basically these ground-up circuit boards, or your, what do you call them, TV top, your your direct TV or your cable box or all that. All the stuff has valuable metals in it. And you just collect these things. And there's so little that's collected relative to what's out there. I made some notes. So today there's over 50 million tons of e-waste produced annually worldwide. And the United Nations is predicting that number will go to 78 million by 2023. So right now, 50 million tons of electronic waste. And that works out to 148 tons of electronic waste produced every 60 seconds. This year alone, the United States will produce over 11 million tons of electronic waste from IT-based components such as computers, laptops, data servers, set-top boxes, which I just mentioned, and smartphones. These end-of-life electronics contain a significant amount of valuable metals, and according to the EPA, 1 ton of printed circuit boards can contain up to 800 times the amount of gold and 40 times the amount of copper mined in 1 ton of conventional ore. So if you want to buy the best mining company in the world, you might consider subscribing to the Morgan Report, because this thing is pretty phenomenal. It's estimated that every ton of circuit boards contains over $5,000 worth of these valuable metals. So what I'm concerned with, Dunagun, is that there'll be, and this has already happened a couple times, there'll be a company that is pursuing the electronic waste industry, and there's competitors, and I'm for competition, and they basically are pushing the envelope as far as what their capabilities are, and get a lot more promotion, because this company that I am involved with, from the aspect of research, and I do own it, is so quiet that one of these other companies will kind of get the limelight. And this actually already happened once. There was a company in Canada that was on their Shark Tank equivalent. I forget the name of the actual TV show. And boy, did we get a flood of people that were so concerned. Oh my God. Well, basically they hadn't even perfected the system, and it wasn't inert, even though they implied that it was. And there was a lot of things, but boy, I mean, all of our people knew immediately, and were really worried because of what was stated verbally wasn't really factual. It was on the edge, let's say. And, you could say up for interpretation. The truth of the matter was our company had already looked at it. In fact, they came to us and wanted us to like buy out, their process so that we could, we don't want that process. That's running sugar water through your, through your gasoline engine. We use gas in ours. No thanks.
Yeah, right.
But anyway, so I really gave you probably more info than you wanted, but I'm still excited about it. I just wish, it's nice to be first, but it also hurts at times, because until another newsletter writer or somebody else picks it up, or, there's a big splash with, let's say, this billion-dollar company on recycling, and that they're using this new process, and they build a pilot plant in Tennessee, and it works great, and blah, blah, blah. Until you get something like that out there, and then the Wall Street Journal picks it up, or Barron's or somebody, until that happens, we're just kind of biding time. But for those that are willing to speculate on something that is one of the best things I've seen in years, it means there's opportunity still, because it's basically undiscovered.
Another thing we wanted to circle back with you on was this fact that there's so many people on our channel and elsewhere that debate the virtues of sound money like gold and silver versus cryptos. They talk about how they are allies, or can be allies, against fiat money. If fiat money is considered to be, first, under the control of the government, and secondly, that it's infinitely elastic and that any amount of it can be created, as Catherine Austin Fitts and Dr. Mark Skidmore would remind us. Whereas both, solid sound money and cryptos are seen as, in some ways, finite. But there's a lot of debate back and forth about which one is the right way to go if there is a collapse of fiat currencies, and people reminding us that, well, sound money has been around for 5,000 years, et cetera. And other people saying, yeah, but it's no good for making instantaneous worldwide, online purchases and things like that. So you had a project where you were looking at backing a crypto medium with silver, and if you could bring us up to date on where that project is going.
Sure. In fact, it's going to be probably half of the lecture that I'm giving at the Red Pill conference. So I'll kind of kill two birds with one stone here, as we would circle back to this. My presentation is titled Money, Past, Present, and Future. So I talk about the money of the past. I know it's seashells and it's necklaces and it's whatever we say it is, but that really didn't last very long. Basically, the major vote by people of the world has been it's precious metals. And that's a fact. I mean, you can argue me all you want that salt was money. Yeah, it was. But if you look at history from a long-term perspective and you're honest, You know, it was precious metals most of the time, and that's what the humanity settled on. So that's the past, money past. Money present, we know what fiat is, or most anyone on this program knows, and where it leads. They always fail. So I'll touch on that briefly. And then money future. And I'm all for competing currencies. I mean, I'm not going to be sitting here saying that the best way to go is sound money only. That's maybe my personal belief. But if the marketplace determines that there's other ones that compete and are more valued by the public, then who am I to determine what it is? I don't want to control it. I want the free market to determine it. Having said that, the project I'm with is called it's called LODE, LODE, for like mother lode. You can go to, and this doesn't sound like the right URL, but it is, type in AG, which is the periodic symbol for silver. So it's AG dot or decimal, LODE, LODE, decimal, ONE. So it's AG dot LODE dot ONE. I'll take you right to the website. It's been revamped, and it's pretty well done in my view, and does a pretty good explanation for what it is. It's basically, I'll describe it as a silver bank. And for those that are depositors of the bank, you get a return on your silver in silver. For those that just want to use it as a token, use that quick exchange that you just talked about, peer-to-peer or business-to-peer, or, you know, all those availabilities are there. And it's still working. It's still a work in progress. They haven't, you know, completed everything in the system. But the goal is to get to a debit card that you will be able to, you know, carry in your wallet, and it's, of course, transparent to any merchant, because all they care about is it's in the electronic banking system and it clears. So if you go to the gas station and put your card in the slot and pump gas, you know, as long as the electronics clear at the other end, you're good to pump gas. So they don't care if you're debiting silver or, you know, cocoa beans. It doesn't matter as long as the bank is happy with the transaction. So a lot of things happening in this whole crypto space, blockchain. A lot of really outside the box thinkers are coming up with some pretty interesting ideas on how to utilize this basically open source software. And I think it's a good thing. I think there'll be a lot to be leery of. You have to be careful. I like this, a partial silver. I think silver is still money, although I'm in the minority. But obviously, if money can be anything you say it is, then it certainly can be silver, because it can be anything you say. It can be seashells or, you know, wampum or salt. It can be silver as well. So I will have some, let me rephrase that. Some of the load management will be at the Red Pill conference.
Oh.
And so when you really want to get into the nitty gritty and all that, and what's the software look like and stuff, I really can't answer. There will be someone there to answer that question. I mean, I'm called an ambassador. I'm promoting it because I believe in it. I'm involved in it. I did load some silver into the system. So I'm biased. You know, I want it to work, but you certainly don't have to. You can be an observer. In fact, to be conservative, you just observe it until it's up running, those debit cards are issued and everything's functioning properly. And then, you know, you can get involved at that point if you want to be very conservative. A lot of people that follow my work are willing to take a higher risk for a higher return, because the people that loaded silver in early in the system are getting a higher, I'll call it a yield. I don't know if I'm allowed to call it a yield, but reward maybe is the right word legally, than you would get if you did it now, but you still could get rewarded.
Now, you've mentioned the Red Pill Expo, so let's go ahead and mention to people that you're going to be there. G Edward Griffin's going to be there. Robert Kiyosaki's going to be there. Jeff Berwick. A lot of other people that they may have heard of from other conferences in the past are going to be there. Dunagun Kaiser from Reluctant Preppers is going to be there. So if people want to meet in person, shake hands and exchange cards, that sort of thing. We'll also be getting a chance to interview you face-to-face and some of the other presenters as well. So looking forward to that. Any particular things from your past experience at the Red Pill Expos that you've attended in the past that you're looking towards this one with anticipation of what you're expecting to see there?
Yeah, I think there's only been 3. I believe this is the 4th one, or maybe this is the 3rd. But one was in Montana. I did not attend. One was here in Spokane. I did. I was a vendor. I set up a booth. And that was the 2018 Red Pill Conference. And, of course, this is the 2019. I'll be a speaker, as you just said. So and I gave you that background to say to respond to your question. I was pretty much blown away. I mean, I've been, down the rabbit hole a few times and more than one rabbit hole. It's not just the sound money rabbit hole. It's a lot of rabbit holes, the health thing, the food chain,
education,
our water,
news,
fluoride. Yep. I mean, anything that, it's a conspiracy, I probably looked at it. And I was really kind of overwhelmed with joy that Ed brings people in that just really have their act together and extremely knowledgeable, and they're, I don't know if low key is a good word, but they're calm in their presentation. Not that you have to be excited. A couple of them are really fired up, but they really know their stuff. They're experts. They're people you can trust. They're people that aren't just, armchair analysts. These are people actually out there activists doing something. So what I learned about what's true about the healthcare system was fascinating, because I thought I knew something about it. I did know a little, but the woman, they had a couple people on that. And so what I'm trying to say succinctly is he covers almost all bases, gives you people that you really want to get their business cards from and get on their websites and learn about. You might not need them today, but later on, if you have a healthcare issue and you're supposed to be required to provide such and such a thing, you can get on this website as an example and get what the law is and just show it to them. Get right back in their face in a nice, meaningful, calm, deliberate way. You don't have to be mean. You can, but so there's I was just, again, I know I'm repeating myself. I couldn't believe that there was so much information. One, I would say that I didn't know, but the depth and quality. So I expect that the 2019 will be of the same ilk. He's probably going to bring in some really heavy hitters that are not boastful, but really are important to have in your Rolodex in all aspects, pretty much.
So,
because
folks, you owe it to yourselves and your families. I mean, the reason you're watching our channel is because you want to get alternative viewpoints and independent viewpoints that aren't just corporate or government offered viewpoints. So the Red Pill Expo, you can find out more about it at redpillexpo.org. I would just suggest people check it out and really take a serious opportunity to take it in. So there's also a online or streaming option available if people can't travel. If you don't live near the New England, I know you're going to come far from Spokane, Washington.
Oh yeah.
But anyway,
here's the. I just happen to have it on my desk. My desk is fairly messy, but so there's the box from 2017, and Richard Gage, I know from 9/11 Truth. I'd been to his house. I won't read them all, but
sure.
He really puts out some heavy hitters, and I trust almost everybody that's on here. So,
well, we'll look forward to seeing you there in 2 weeks, and anybody else who's watching, look forward to the opportunity, if you can, to make it out there. I'll meet you as well. David, any last thoughts before we let you go?
Yeah, I think the last thought I'll provide is I think we're getting at a critical juncture here. I think there's a fair amount of people that are, and I like your title, reluctant. And I think it's time to be less reluctant and more active. I think it's more important, and you could do it in a very cognizant, meaningful, sincere way without having to jump up and down and point at the skies and look at that line going through the blue or any of that stuff. You can just, and I think it's best to find something that you're most concerned with. Perhaps it's education, perhaps it's vaccines, perhaps it's the food chain, perhaps it's the healthcare system, and just focus on that. It's much better, in my view, to be very studied in one topic and stick to it. I'm pretty well versed. I'm not just silver. I look at all the resources. I've written on all the resources. The Dunagun report talks about all the resources, but I'm kind of known as a silver guy, and that's fine. I don't want to diminish that. But I can't cover, what's going on with the food chain, for example, and maybe I lose some of my credibility or whatever. So anyway, I'm just pointing out that I think it's good to focus. I think if you're focused on the topic that you're most passionate about and just figure out a plan of simplicity and always ask questions, don't tell anyone anything. Hey, what do you think about packaged food? Open up the door. Well, I don't know. I eat it all the time. have you ever heard of this blah blah? This guy Dunagun Kaiser that says he doesn't eat packaged food because he got, whatever. But if you just keep the Socratic method, asking these questions, and start to get people to think, rather than tell them it's bad for you and I read this and I know this and you got this, people are resistant to being told anything. It's just human nature to be resistant to being told. But if you ask a question, you can actually teach a lot by asking the right questions. It takes a while to develop that skill, but it's a very meaningful skill. So you ask for a last minute, long-winded David Morgan something or other, well, you got it. Focus and ask questions and be active. Get active. Don't be reluctant. We got to do something. We got to help each other. Even if it's just even if you help one person eat better or one person, better their lives in some way.
Yep.
You've contributed. You've contributed greatly, actually.
We don't mind your long answers. We are glad to yield these few extra minutes of the floor to the elder statesman from Spokane. So, David, as always, thank you very much for joining us on Reluctant Preppers. And people can find you at themorganreport.com.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Reluctant Preppers. If you haven't heard, we've already started our monthly 1-ounce U.S. Silver Eagle thank you gift to one active Patreon subscriber each month, signed by your host, Dunagun Kaiser. And you don't want to miss out on that.
Please help us grow by subscribing today at patreon.com/reluctantpreppers.